Winter is around the corner and you want to know how to make cinematic looking photos and dramatic looking photos in the snow. In today's video, I'm going to show you my process of how I edit winter photos. Now, I did have a video last year and you can check it out right here or here, one of these sides. I did have a video last year explaining how I edit winter photos, but in this video, I want to take a different approach and I want to go over some of the steps that I do to make very dramatic looking scenes. You don't have to follow my steps exactly, but I will try to show you my thought process when it comes to editing these photos. And I want to help you go from something that looks like this to something that looks like this. But I will be taking some different approaches because I edited this photo last year and I want to do some minor changes. So if it doesn't look exactly the same, please bear with me, and you don't have to follow step by step. You could, but I'm here to teach you how I think and how to edit photos. First thing that I will probably do when looking at this photo is starting with the basic exposures. I will not touch the white balance and I will not touch the tint, and I will tell you guys why later on in the video. When I first got this photo into Lightroom, the way I edited this photo was pretty much using a lot of local masks and local adjustments, and it is not different this time, but I will not go as hard as I did with masks on the original photo. But I will show you the two basic masks that I do use. Three or four. Looking here at the histogram above, you can see that this photo is not really properly exposed. It is a bit underexposed, but that is fine because we can always bring out those highlights. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna increase our highlights to around, I'll say 80, around 80. So what I want to do is I want to accentuate the highlights and make them brighter. So these lights right here and the car lights right here. Also even these lights on the left side of our subject. Now, next thing I want to do is I want to drop down the shadows. Now you're going to be asking, well, why are you dropping down the shadows? Well, basically just to add more contrast. So increasing the highlights and dropping down the shadows just adds a bit more contrast to our image. After that, I'm going to go to my whites. Now, if you increase the whites, it becomes a bit too much. And I want to make it very like moody, very dark, but also not too dark. So I want to direct my viewers' attention towards this person right here, our subject, right? I want him to be the main person in this story. I don't really care about this left side or this car on the right side. So I don't want to increase our whites. I might just drop them down a bit. Now, after dropping the whites, I'm going to go to my blacks and I'm going to up them a bit just to add a bit more, I guess, visibility if you want to the photo. Now I will not add too much because if you go up with the blacks, it will just, decrease the contrast, make everything kind of white washed out, and all the black points, we won't have any true black points or blacks in our image, and I want that contrast, right? So I'll just up a bit just to make it a bit more viewable. Okay, after that, we are gonna go to the presence. Now, this might sound counterintuitive because if you want that kind of cinematic, dreamy look, you usually drop down the clarity. But what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna increase the clarity a bit just to get some clarity here in the snow and the ice. And I like to get that texture in the ice. I'm also gonna up the texture as well to around +5 just to get a bit more, punchiness. And I will go down to my saturation slider and I will drop it down. I don't really like to have my saturation slider up. If I do want to add a bit of saturation, I will use the vibrance. Next up, we go to the tone curve. Okay, so now after adding our not really S curve, but here we crushed our blacks and we added a bit more contrast in the image. And then in my red channel, green channel, and blue channel, I made the exact same S curve, the typical S curve you see. Now you're gonna look at this image and you're gonna be like, oh, it is super crushed, like all the colors are gone. Bear with me for a minute, we're gonna change all of that. Now before touching the HSL sliders, I will go to the color calibration And always make sure, if you want to change anything with the color calibration, make sure you do that before touching the HSL curves, because they kind of affect each other, right? So if you want to edit anything with your HSL curves, make sure that you have your color calibration where you want it. So going to the color calibration, I will move the tint to a bit more green, just because it is a snowy night and I like to add a bit of green tint. I will move my hues, my red hues, to +20, more towards the oranges, and I will increase the reds saturation to around 40. Also, I will move my greens towards the teals, so I will go to around +50. So I am trying to get a teal and orange kind of look, and obviously they're not the only two colors in this image, but in the end result it will kind of feel that way. And let's desaturate the greens to -10, move the blues more towards the teal as well at -5, and drop the saturation by, say, -10. All right, now that the color calibration is done, now we can work with the Now we go to the color grading section, and this is where we can add a certain color into our shadows, midtones, and highlights. I will add basically a kind of a teal into our shadows, so that is, sorry, 220, and I will increase that also just a tad bit to like 25. And in my highlights, I will go to around here, 45, and I will increase this a tiny bit as well. Now when it comes to sharpening, I always hold the Alt key, move my masking, try to find the edges that I really want to sharpen, and I just, you know, sharpen it. Something I really like to do is to add a vignette on my surrounding image. Now what you can do is you can make a mask and invert and kind of decrease the exposure. You can pretty much do that, but you can also use the vignette option right here. And pretty much what I want to do is I want to add a tiny vignette. I will drop the midpoint to 0 just to make the focus more on the middle part, and the feathering I will increase it to 100 just to not make it as sharp. So there we go. Boom, boom, boom. Just a tiny bit more, so it basically tells your viewer that the center part of the image is the most important part. Okay, so now we are basically done with the basic adjustments, and you're gonna look and be like, oh, well, this doesn't look like the other photo, right? So this is the final result. This is what we have. Why don't they look the same? Well, with Lightroom's update that came out last year, the local adjustments and all the mask adjustments that you can do, this is where pretty much all the magic happens and where all the dramatic scenes start to come to fruition. Now the first mask that I will do is pretty much I will select an object and I will select my subject right here, and the AI should do a pretty good job of finding my subject, as you can see. And what I want to do is I want to make him stand out, right? So what I will do is I will increase my shadows just to see him more, just to see a tiny bit more, and I will increase my highlights. And I will increase my highlights because the light here is falling on our subject and I want him to, you know, show up a bit more. But what I will do is I will crush the blacks and I will drop the exposure a bit, up the contrast by 2, and I will increase the clarity and a bit of texture. And this basically helps us see our subject more, right? So now he's kind of popping off a bit more. You can kind of see him more, right? Then what you want to do is you duplicate and invert this mask. And now you've selected everything but your subject, right? Now, obviously you can also add the dog as a subject, but for this example, I'm just going to use the person. And what I want to do with this inverted mask, let's remove the overlay. What I want to do is, first of all, I want to basically add haze to my photo, and adding this haze makes it look like a dreamy, foggy kind of look. But now it is pretty much more warm, right? So what I do is I go to the temperature and I cool it down, and I'll just cool it down as much as I want, because it is a winter image. It should be cold, it should feel cold. So I just cool it down just a tiny bit. -30 should be fine. Now look, we went from pretty much this to this. Now let me turn off these masks. We went from this very crunchy looking image to this, which looks pretty dreamy, right? And literally with two masks, with two masks, we go from this to this. That's how powerful these masks are, right? What else I'm gonna do? Well, I look at this image and I see there's a bit more light here. I want the eye to be focused more on the subject right here. So I'll do probably a radial gradient, and I'll make a circle right here, and I will go up, and I will probably just drop down the exposure just a tiny bit. Now this is fine and dandy, but I do want to make it more dreamy, more painter-like, like it's a painting. Create a new word, add it to the dictionary. All right, so how do we do this? Well, how would I do this? Well, I would probably make a radial gradient right here, kind of like this big. I just want to affect this area, right? I will probably subtract my subject right here, right? So now I'm just affecting this area, and I will probably increase my exposure a bit, increase my contrast probably, and I will probably drop my clarity just to add this kind of hazy look. So now look what happens when you kind of drop it down, and it looks like a painting, right? It doesn't look real. It just looks like someone drew this, right? But somehow they drew the subject to be this clear, but everything else is kind of hazy and kind of desaturated, and it does make it look not real, and that's fine. It's just a stylistic choice. You can also pretty much, if you want your subject to be affected as well, you can do that, but in my case I don't want to do that, right? And what you can also do is with this mask is we cooled down everything else. So we've cooled down kind of the darker areas. We can also warm this up a bit, and now you have this very distinct teal and orange kind of look. I don't know if you can see it, but it's kind of right there. So now we went from this to this. Now if I want to be now that the main, okay, so now we have our kind of main image, and this is our main idea and what it looks like. And now all you have to do is kind of focus on the minute small details, right? So what you can do as well is you can make a linear gradient right here. Let's say this light on this side is too distracting, right? So what you can do is pretty much kind of bring that down a bit, bring down the highlights a bit, kind of, you know, make the people focus more right here. What you can do as well is you can make another one from the other side, because you want to remove the distraction of the car, and you can just kind of drop it down a bit. Also maybe drop down the clarity. Even from the left side you can also drop down the clarity. And yeah, other than that, you can also do some brushing right here, so you can increase your highlights. So you can make a small brush kind of right here on the branches. If you show the overlay, it's right there. And all you can do is, if you just want to up your highlights just a tiny bit, which is basically these parts, and yeah, and then you can also paint around the darker areas right here, like this branch and this branch. And you can also just drop down the shadows kind of, you know, just a tiny bit, -1, -2, just to make it more punchy. And one thing I actually did on the original photo was I made an object right here on this sign, and I actually just, you know, increased my highlights and I increased my shadows just to make it pop a bit more, and drop my blacks just to make the sign kind of visible for people to read. What you can also do is, as you can see here, these are also like orange lights. These are more white lights, I guess. And what you can do is you can make a radial gradient right here above these lights, and you can warm these up to more of an orangey look right here. And now you have a consistent teal and orange look. But yeah, that is it for this video. I hope you guys enjoyed this editing tutorial, this winter editing tutorial, how to make your photos more kind of dreamy, cinematic, painterly. And yeah, if you like this video, please consider dropping a like, consider subscribing. I do have more Lightroom tutorials coming. I also will leave my presets down in the description below. They are on sale from now till the end of December. They're 10 bucks. There's also a wallpaper pack for your phone or computer. Please check those out if you want to. And thank you so much for watching, and I will see you guys in the next one.